Dave, Ryder Practice was indoors earlier today, and then I saw the injury report come out, and one name on there had me going, oh no. He just had his breakout game last week. Thomas Bertrand Houdon, the DNP that did not practice, and groin. What's the situation, and does this affect his availability for Saturday in Hamilton?
Well, the story is late in practice yesterday, he felt something. You could see visibly during one of the drills that he was running that he pulled up, and I don't want to say you could tell immediately it was a strain or whatever else the case might be, but there was discomfort. He was looked at, and today I think for their better judgment, they held him out, right? See how that muscle reacts to some treatment and see where he ends up on the weekend. I know the follow-up question does that mean Kadeem Carey gets into the lineup? Head coach Corey Mace emphatically said no, that was not the plan. Although Carey did get more carries of the football in practice today, I don't think he's even a consideration for Hamilton. However, I did say that late last season, a game in Calgary when Raquel Armstead was signed on a Monday and played on the Friday.
I remember me, you, and Luke standing in the press box just like looking around at each other going, and then he goes off for 200 yards. It's like, oh, okay. Now, let's say Bertrand Houdon doesn't go. Mario Anderson has been around all through training camp and is on the practice roster. Do you think he would elevate just because of time spent in the system?
Potential for that. Potential that you would see Morgan Runge take on a little bit more of an impactful role. Again, it's going to be an interesting question. Keep in mind, Thomas Bertrand Houdon does play some special teams or can play special teams. Mm-hmm. Additionally, he is a Canadian. So there's the roster and ratio consideration that you have to factor in as well.
Day 2, it was indoors. Just overall, what did they work on? Was it crisp? Were we, did you like what you saw to be like, all right, everybody looks focused? Because there's going to be some roster changes this week. There's going to be guys in different spots and guys that have hit the 6 game that, they're sideline fans like us now.
Definitely liked what I saw. It was an intentful practice to be done, and it was taken care of. I didn't think the intensity dropped at all. I think Coach Mace would agree with that, and the fact that it was very businesslike, very professional, and I think the athletes are appreciative of the fact that, number one, the consideration is being given to air quality, but also for their bodies to make sure that they're tuned and ready to go for this weekend in Hamilton. So again, they're going to be fresh when it comes to the way they physically perform. Don't forget, they also had the 3-day weekend away from the field, and I shouldn't say weekend because that implies that they weren't doing any work. There was a ton of film study ongoing, but I'm just saying that they should be physically okay.
All right, Ryder Practice earlier today. Because of the smoke, they went indoors. A lot of injuries. We talked about that yesterday. People being added to the 6-game injured list. Thomas Bertrand Houdon did not practice today. But there's still a chance, you're saying, are you telling me there's still a chance that he could play on Saturday in Hamilton?
There's a chance. Well, obviously, we won't get to see practice tomorrow as it is a closed practice the Riders are holding. But again, I'm hoping it's more precautionary than anything else. But again, there was a muscle tweak, and you don't mess around with it in week 2 of the season, right? You go ahead and you make sure it's taken care of, because a small problem when you're talking muscles can, of course, become a big problem very quickly. So we'll have to wait and see for Thomas Bertrand Houdon. He was there. He didn't participate in any drills. He was there, though, taking mental reps. You could see how engaged he was. So, again, never say never, but we really won't know until Friday when the depth chart.
Yeah, because a lot of us, the minute I saw the injury report, my brain just went to Kadeem Carey. All right, you had a chance to catch up with Coach Mace after practice today?
Yeah, and so the one thing that I wondered, so now this is the second consecutive day that air quality has forced the Riders inside, and I asked him, does that mean that any of the intensity that you would have expected it has been lost being inside?
No, you hope not. It's just I think when you change the environment a little bit, usually, specifically with me, if we're going indoors, it's because we physically can't go outdoors. So usually those, might turn into a walkthrough, but this is a little bit different. So the mindset still has to be, we got to get better. And I think that we have over these last couple of days, but we want to keep that intensity, fairly.
And so does this mean that this is a negative with them being inside?
No, yeah, no. I mean, if we're able to get the reps, we're good. I mean, certainly being out in our own field with proper markings and all that other stuff would certainly help. But it's an adapt and conquer kind of deal, and just a little adversity, man. It's good practice.
And adversity is kind of what the Rough Riders are anticipating, Maz, when they get into Hamilton. It is a hard place to play. It is the crowd's emotional, they're vocal, they're loud. I remember growing up listening to the radio and hearing all about the humidity. And until I was there last year to experience it firsthand, the humidity is a factor. They play right off the lake at the stadium formerly known as Tim Hortons Field. So it's going to be interesting. And of course, they're coming up against a team that likes to throw the ball. The Riders themselves gave up 400 yards passing last week. So Bo Levi Mitchell, as you heard on the SportsCage and of course the coaches show on Monday, the first ever touchdown pass he threw was to head coach Corey Mace. So now Corey Mace is once again preparing to come up against Bo Levi Mitchell, which again he knows is going to provide a big challenge.
I can't speak highly enough of the guy. He's a walking Hall of Famer. Not a lot of stuff that, he hasn't seen, kind of deal similar to Trevor. So, yeah, you got to be on it, not only as a play caller, but as the players defensively. You got to be on it or he's going to expose you. I've seen it with my own, too, on the good side and on the bad side. So, everybody's got to be on their P's and Q's.
So, head coach Corey Mace, again, it's going to be a battle and a test this week in Hamilton.
Tomorrow on the show, around 3:20-ish, Rick Zamperin, who is the new play-by-play guy for the Hamilton Ticats, will join us. A lot of us watched that game in Calgary, and Hamilton looked good in spurts. Bo Levi Mitchell looked good in spurts. But we've all seen Bo, when he plays against Saskatchewan, look good all games, and not necessarily in spurts. So it'll be interesting to get Rick's take on what happened last week in Calgary and what we may see as far as some of the changes or tweaks they're going to make for Saturday in Hamilton. I expect that they will play better because they will be at home using all of those advantages. And Dave, you've been covering Rider football a long time. No matter who he's played for, Bo Levi Mitchell has always played well against the Riders. No matter who the coaches were on the other side, who the quarterback was, Bo has kind of had the Riders' number.
You're right. And the one thing I do want to go back to with week one is, how often do you hear the cliche, there's a handful of plays that dictated the outcome of the game? And I truly believe that to be the case for both the Rough Riders and the Tiger Cats. If you look at the Rough Riders, right, there were 3 times that I counted in that football game where they had the football in hand defensively and could have made a turnover, right? So those are 3 plays that didn't go the Riders' way. There's also another 2 plays where uncharacteristic fumbles occurred. Right. So they gave the ball away 2 more times. So that I really feel impacted the outcome of the. If you go ahead and take away or give away, if you will, you look at those numbers and it could have been a very different game. And I feel the same way in Hamilton as well. Their game in Calgary, they misjudged a kickoff to start the second half where they should have had the ball in the wind. Instead, Calgary gets it deep in their end and they score into the wind. And then they just couldn't stop Calgary in the third quarter when they were going into when Calgary was going into the wind and Hamilton had it at their back. So there's a couple of instances there, a goal line stand where Hamilton fails to punch it in. There's number 3. So the team is close. They are a younger group, I think, on the back end, and it's going to be interesting to watch and see how they perform defensively. And I'm really curious. I know that Bo Levi Mitchell wants to find Kenny Lawler. It's very apparent that why wouldn't you, right? When you sign the guy as a free agent, you want to go ahead and bring him on. But I thought it was to the detriment of Shamar Bridges. And Shamir, he was sensational last year, right? Before he got hurt at the end of the year. And I would very much like to know what his season could have been like if he wasn't shaken up. And so I'm curious to see whether or not they can work him in to the receiving core and the offensive game plan a little bit more, as opposed to looking for Lawler. Not suggesting you shouldn't, just suggesting that maybe there's going to be more opportunities for him now that the team might focus on Kenny Lawler.
We know CJ Avery is out. We still don't know because he's been practicing. Roland Milligan, whether he'll be in or out, and that may change the whole game plan for Milanovich. Saskatchewan Roughrider practice was closed again today because of the smoke. They took it indoors. And I liked your question to Mace last hour. It's inside. It's a little different environment. it's one thing when you hear the pads popping outside because it's outside, you're at the stadium, all that's going on. Did you see the intensity there indoors? Because it is a different setting.
Intense, again, it's a different type of intensity. It isn't a physical battle intensity. It was more of a commitment to doing things right intensity. There was laser focus on the task that was at hand when it came to installing the playbook and being ready for Hamilton. So the intensity was there, was a different type of intensity, but Coach Mace, as he told us last hour, wasn't upset with it at all. He's happy with the way that the team is getting themselves ready for this week's game in Hamilton.
A lot of questions about the roster because we know that CJ Avery is going to be out 6 game. Kean Schaefer Baker, 6 game. Peyton Collins, 6 game. So there could be changes. But AJ Ouellette and Roland Milligan Jr. were practicing again today, correct?
Yes, they both were. Roland Milligan Jr. was much more engaged than what he was yesterday. Yesterday, he was more limited than a full participant, but today he was much more involved in all of the defensive drills that were taking place on the field. Thomas Bertrand-Houdon was a spectator, as we talked about earlier, so that meant that the brunt of the carries were going to A.J. Ouellette, as you would expect. Mario Anderson got a few, but more were going the way of Kadeem Carey with the second-team offense. Coach Mace was real quick to say, whoa, that's not the plan for him getting
No.
into this game in Hamilton. Hold your horses.
Coach.
Yeah, hold on.
Coach,
so I know we're all excited.
I know, but Coach, you have Rider Nation in the palm of your hands. Don't shut us down. Let us think open-ended to be like, well, I don't know, man. It's still early. A lot of things could happen.
Well, and the other thing that I think is going to happen is that we're going to see Daniel Johnson, who, of course, was a draft pick last year of the team. He is going to move on to the starting offensive line. So Peyton Collins, who started last week in the place of Jacob Brammer, and you'll recall there was a little bit of a shuffle because Brammer was playing on the guard spot, and then you had Travion Tate playing the tackle on the left side of the offensive line. So they shuffled that around to bring Collins in, but they really liked, I think, what they saw from Tate, and they're excited to see what Daniel Johnson can do at that left tackle position. So the offensive line, as they lined up today, was Johnson, Tate, Furland, so your left tackle, left guard, and center. The right side, the right guard was, once again, Jacob Brammer, and then at right tackle, you've got Jamarcus Hardrick. So it looks like that is going to be very much what the offensive line looks like going into Hamilton. Zach Fry was taking the extra rep along the offensive line while Morgan Runge was taking some reps as the tight end on the offense, as we saw him do in game number 1. So I think that that's what you're going to look at as we get closer to game time on Saturday for the offensive line.
So last week against Ottawa, that was the first meaningful football Jamarcus Hardrick has played in a long, long time. How do you think he graded out? You try and watch. It's one thing when you're watching on TV because obviously you don't always get to see, but how did you think he played in his first game back in a long time?
I was curious. I was kind of watching because I was curious whether or not he would be tentative, right? When you come back from an injury, sometimes you have to push it as far as you can. And I thought in training camp that he had done a terrific job of doing that, pushing that, stressing himself to make sure that he was where he wanted to be. I was a little surprised he didn't try it out in the preseason, but clearly he didn't need to. I didn't think he was tentative. I thought that he did the things that he was expected to do. And again, Pro Football Focus, they're the ones that go ahead and help award the honorable mentions and the honor roll stuff through the Canadian Football League. And the one award that the Riders did win in week number 1 was their offensive line play. They graded out at the top of the class. And a fun fact, the highest graded offensive lineman for the Saskatchewan Roughrider within the group that was number 1 overall in the CFL was Peyton Collins in his first ever pro football game.
Man, you got to feel like you battle through training camp. We talk about how hard it is to make a team. You come up, it's a training camp. You got 2 to 3 weeks, especially an offensive line. Incredibly tough spot. And then you get your shot because all of these things had to align. And then unfortunately, you get injured and hope, like they talk about adversity. Well, here you go. Here's a whole bunch of adversity in your young career. And if he can bounce back from that, because when he was in, he played well. You didn't see Trevor Harris scrambling for his life because anything that was coming from the left side. That's for sure.
No, absolutely. And the other thing to point out was, the one scramble that I can recall off the top of my head from Trevor Harris was to his side, which means that he was able to take care of that contained man and allow Harris to escape the pocket and get outside there. And the other thing is that, it looked horrific. Again, he waved off the cart, he waved off the training the staff, and he walked off the field on his own, and he was back at practice today, albeit with a crutch and a brace. But, I think that's a terrific sign, and it's a significant injury that he has suffered, and he is going to have to work a long way to come back. That is very apparent, but much worse, right? So if you look at it on that side, there is a silver lining to the cloud.
We know that CJ Avery is going to be out. What are you thinking potentially for that spot getting filled? Will it go Canadian with AJ Allen? Do they stick American? Is it Antoine Brooks Jr.? The special teams implications that play into this, like there's a lot that goes into that spot.
Absolutely, and I would be surprised if perhaps he didn't. If I would be surprised if it's not AJ Allen that gets the start there. That would be my idea for what the reps looked like today. Now, again, being indoors and not the best vantage point, the defense was predominantly working down at the other end, so I didn't have my pad out and figuring out who was taking what number of reps. But AJ Allen, I would suggest, is probably the guy there. But the other one that we haven't really talked about that's intriguing is the fact that Jorgen Hughes, who played game number 150 back last Thursday, was very, very limited in his work both yesterday and today. So long snapping for the most part was Lake Corte Moore. So again, another dynamic, especially a dynamic that'll have to be contended with or thought about when it comes to what that's going to look like on special teams, right? Joe Couch was the holder last week, and now a different snapper potentially as well, right?
That one last week where I'm sure on film in the beautiful Rider film room looked awful on a 150-inch screen. I know on my screen at home when the hold and how that turned out, not great. They eventually they got it down, but something like that. Your long slapper, it's funny. You don't notice him until you notice that he's not there. So hopefully that rectifies itself. One guy that we know who's probably going to be busy on Saturday in that Rider secondary is going to be Marcus Sales. And you had a chance to chat with him after practice today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the conversation with the secondary and defense has been giving up 400 yards to Drew Brown and the Ottawa Redblacks. Drew Brown, by the way, not going to be playing this week after a hit he took in week one. But back to Marcus Sales. Again, talk to him a little bit about this week's challenge, which is coming up against a player that he knows well from his time in the league, Bo Levi Mitchell.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think a lot of people know he's the gunslinger. He wants to throw deep balls. He wants to make explosion plays. And, if we feel like we stop those, we'll be okay. If we're able to make him inch down the field and make him, go through his reads and his progressions, we feel like, our D-line is so good. We feel like if we give them time to get to him, they'll pretty much get to him pretty fast.
Which is a good thing, right? Yeah, exactly, right? And you got to get there. And the Riders were, I think, comfortably happy with the way that they played on that defensive line, right? You got Mike Rose and Micah Johnson on the inside, and then you've got Shane Ray on the two ends, and then you had Haba Baldonado who came in and played a heck of a ball game in that rotation that they ran up front. So, yeah, it's possible. And you did hear Coach Mace after the game talk a little bit about, how there were some points where maybe he was a little more conservative due to the personnel that they had with, again, missing Roland Milligan Jr., for example, right? So obviously a lot of things to consider.
The one thing we do know between Milanovic and Bo Levi Mitchell, they're not shy. They will always press it. Conservative is not the word to describe either of them, coaching style or playing style. And the one thing that I think we've maybe seen a little bit out of Bo, I think last year after like the benching and coming back in, where there was that willingness to take some of the underneath stuff, the stuff that he would never go to before in his gunslinger days, where he's trying to take some of the stuff that is right there, because if he can live to play another down, he'll take a 2nd and 5 now. He's not just looking for, to get 19 yards on the first down. And that was always my thing. I'm like, wow, a patient Bo Levi Mitchell is almost more dangerous than just the gunslinger, because look, when he was young, he'd bomb it twice, 2 incompletions, and if they got a punt, it was no big deal. But that's changed under Milanovic.
You're right. And one word that I like with patience also could relate to the Saskatchewan secondary, right? Because by my count, there was about 3 plays where they had the ball in their hands, and Coach Mace talked a little bit about it earlier, and the fact that there were plays that were there to be made, and maybe you were a little too patient to come up and make that play. And I asked Marcus Sales about that as well, about those chances that they had and if they identified them through film work this week.
Yeah, well, I mean, we definitely. I mean, I don't know how many we touched, two or three, and I mean, those are the ones we got to come up with. I mean, because the opportunities are only going to come so many times in a game, and if we're able to get 2, 3, or however many in a game, we might get have just as many as we did last year. So hopefully we can build on top of that, but we just got to make sure we catch those balls.
It's funny, Dave. There's that one Marcus Sales clip from last season that I see again and again where down around the Rider goal line, he has a sure interception, and for what it just bounces off his hands.
Well, yeah,
and for
and the one that Nelson Lacombo had, remember, he jumped the road, he came up, and like he was intent on batting that ball down. And I don't know that how much time he believed that he had, because I think that if he knew he had that split second more, he goes and catches it as opposed to batting it away.
It's easy for us to say sitting on the couch.
Oh yeah,
no one's running full on at us or whatever. But that one when Marcus Sales, I think it was a game or two in, and we had a chance. He was down by the goal line, and that one he just sort of the brick hands, and it bounced off. I thought Shane Ray, from what we saw of him last week, I thought Mike Rose, from what we saw, I mean, near the end of the game, and I think, was it the Jameer Thurman hit that we think is what injured Drew Brown? That's what I think it was, when he broke through the middle and then ended up getting the ball away. But I thought, to me, that was the play that Drew Brown didn't look the same after that.
I think that likely was it. Yeah, and again, he was running, he was scrambling, and again, that one, you're right, Jameer Thurman right up the middle, like that. That was a substantial blow that he took. And that was one of the question marks we had coming into the season, right? Was A, the Ottawa quarterbacking depth, and B, the Ottawa offensive line. They tried to address the offensive line, but just like the Roughriders, they had 2 veterans go down in training camp, including former Saskatchewan Roughrider Peter Godber. So
yeah,
interesting question, and times in Ottawa. And again, hopefully for Drew and Ottawa, that he's not substantially hurt, right, and can shake it off.
The one thing we saw in the Calgary game on the weekend was Kenny Lawler dropping passes. Unfortunately, when he was a Winnipeg Blue Bomber playing against the Saskatchewan Roughriders, he didn't have that problem. So Kenny, if it's a Hamilton thing, please keep this up for another week. If you get it together by week 3, that doesn't bother us. But please, Dave, it was very uncharacteristic. And some of these weren't the 50-50 balls or the long bombs. It was 7 yards over the middle, in the hands, and drop. And I'm like, Bo, doesn't matter the name on the back of the jersey. Bo's got more receivers that are dropping passes and killing drives.
Well, and the one thing that caught my eye in that game, and I don't know, and again, this is just Dave vision, so it might be me zeroed in on the wrong thing. I thought that Calgary's secondary was quite physical with Kenny Lawler. And so sometimes knowing that you might get hit is almost as good as getting hit. And so I wondered if there was a couple of instances where, hey, where's this defender? Because I'm sure he's right here, right? So I don't know if that's truly what happened or not. But my assessment of the tape when I watched that, I thought, they're right on him, right on that line of scrimmage.
So as far as physical goes, is it Milligan that would be the most physical against a Lawler? Is it Tavon Campbell? Because Campbell's just a bigger guy than Milligan. I mean, you got Lacombo at safety, but they may keep him away from that. Who do you think would be the most physical in that Rider backfield to go up against Kenny Lawler, as far as if he was hearing footsteps? Who do the Rider footsteps have to come from?
You know what? All of those are options.
Yeah.
Again, that's a great problem to have, right? All of them are options, but CJ Rivas, also, you got to throw into that mix too, right? He is a physical player when he's on the football field. And again, I don't know. Again, I think it's a very physical group all around, whether you're including the linebackers in the secondary or not. Like DeMarcus Fields has gone ahead and he got up there a couple of times last game. So, boy, there are so many options in that secondary for being physical, and they all bring it anyway.
Because the one thing we do know this about Kenny Lawler, no matter who's playing for, he causes matchup problems because there's usually, maybe if there's only one guy on him, someone else has also got secondary responsibility on a Kenny Lawler, which sometimes just that split second of taking the eye away can open it up. Because the other thing about the Ticats and the way that Ted Govea has built that roster, they have other weapons for Bo Levi Mitchell to use if, primary one is covered. And that's what the 400 last week, nothing against Geno Lewis had an okay game. Did you see that the same way? He wasn't outstanding. He didn't kill the Riders. It was a collective group getting that 400, right?
Yeah, I would agree. It was absolutely collective. And the fact that they didn't run the ball very much at all, right? That's going to add up to your yardage total as well, because everybody's going to get yards in a game. It's just how you get those yards. And when you only put up 30 yards of rushing offense, then a lot of it's going to come from the passing game, but not to discredit anything that Ottawa did. But also in saying that, if you go back to our YouTube page, check out our website, sportscage.com. If you go there and you see the videos from our pregame show, right? The pregame coverage that we had with Tavon Campbell, the one thing that you're going to see with Tavon is that he talks about there's no strong side, weak side necessarily when it comes to the secondary. They played left, right. So everyone, like you say, was responsible.